Seattle. Here it comes, across the stars, eating worlds, sucking the energy out of atoms and suns. Here it comes. Bullets can't kill it. Dogs can't bite it. It refuses to listen to reason. Here it comes. It just ate a hydrogen bomb. Oh, my Lord, here it comes, heading our way. Nightmare asteroid, maniac vacuum, transcosmic pig out. Can't stop it, drunk on photons, burping pizzas of poisoned plutonium. It wants our oil. It wants our beautiful lumps of coal. It wants Air Force One, Graceland, and the wash on the line. It will slurp every erg, gnaw every volt, unless... It trashed our magnetic laser net. Barbed wire is useless, napalm a treat. Can't evade it, can't divert it. Only this little boy can stop it. Big blue eyes, mustard on his t-shirt. This adorable towhead with the discount dirt bike and the horny mom. Only Jeffrey Joshua and his fuzzy teddy bear, Mr. Bundy, stands between us and galactic oblivion. Can he? Priscilla was watching a TV movie in the bar at El Papa Muerta. She and several other waitresses had completed the setups in the dining room and were waiting the 5 p.m. opening. Seattleites dined early. Ricky was behind the bar, having been promoted recently to assistant bartender. Priscilla was watching the movie and not watching the movie. Ricky noticed the part that was not watching and came over. Have a hard night in the lab? Matter of fact, there's going to be nothing but hard nights until I can afford the stuff I need. The stuff Priscilla needed was high-quality jasmine oil. It came from France and cost $600 an ounce. Priscilla figured she needed a minimum of 3 ounces to begin with. That would take care of the middle. Then there would still be the matter of matching the base note. What was that goddamned base? Sometimes she wished she had left that bottle where she found it. Go ahead. Tell me your troubles, said Ricky. As a novice bartender, I need the practice. Priscilla sighed. She watched a swoosh of rocket exhaust. The TV color needed adjusting, and the rocket blast was as pink as a nursery. She could have used a jet assist herself, even a soft pastel one. Ricky, she said wearily, do you ever pray? Pray? Yeah, pray. Sure I do, honey. I pray all the time. Well, when you talk to God, does he answer? Absolutely. What does God say? Ricky glanced around her. The bar was starting to fill up with customers waiting for the dining room to open. Have you noticed, she said, that you and I are the only Mexicans in this place? I'm Irish and you're Italian. Ricky, be serious. What does God say? God says the check is in the mail, answered Ricky, moving to the waitress station where the cocktail girl stood gargling a mouthful of orders. In a busy restaurant bar, a waitress must order from a bartender in a particular sequence: neats, rocks, waters, sodas, sevens, tonics, Collins, cokes, miscellaneous mixes, juices, sour blended, creamy blended, beer, and wine. This was partly to aid memory, partly to facilitate arrangement of glassware, mainly to prevent the mix from one drink from tasting in the next. Should a bit of 7-Up spill in the rapid firing of the bar gun into a Collins, it wouldn't be detected, whereas Coke would definitely intrude. Jack, soda, tall, 4 Ritas, a Sunrise, a Dos Equis, and a Bud. A bartender's beauty is in his moves, like a lover's, like a matador's. The finished product means little, a spent orgasm, a dead bull. satiation, and stringy beef. To be sure, there are drinks of fine workmanship and drinks of poor. There are coherent Ramos fizzes and incoherent. There are martinis in which the gin is autonomous, and martinis where integration and harmony of ingredients prevail. Bloody Marys can suffer high blood pressure or low. Yet Priscilla had never heard a customer complain of a drink unless it was to impress a companion, unless there wasn't enough booze therein, and at El Papa Muerta, at least, there was always enough booze. A bartender's beauty is in his moves, in the way he struts his stuff, in the field of rhythms that is set up in the orchestrated hatching of a large order of drinks. A skillful barkeep no more looks at his accoutrements than a practiced typist or pianist peers at the keys, but works with both hands simultaneously, full blast, undimmed by the usual dull requirements of routine. Even in a lull with only one drink to mix, he will not slacken his pace nor take a glyptic approach. When he snatches a bottle from the well, he knows without looking that it is grenadine and not triple sec, and if it should prove to be triple sec, too bad, Dad, the drink is already mixed. Stirring and sloshing, rinsing and wiping, pouring and garnishing, with a fry cook's retention and an acrobat's timing, he virtually dances through his shift, skating, as it were, on the chunky ice he scoops with furious delicacy into each glass. The regular at El Papa Muerta was a master of bar dance. He consumed the space around his station. He had speed, presence, and finesse. His output was huge. Ricky had a lot to learn. Her style was kinky, ugly, and odd, but Priscilla sensed that Ricky would be a good one in time. To her advantage, she was impatient with small stuff and detail, and with the fussing and adjusting that the dilettante in any field tries to substitute for inspiration and thus rescue his art. She had a capacity for the grand, and it was with some faint concept of eventual grandeur that she set about to mix the first order of drinks on that autumn evening, her arms and her mood arched to parallel the natural curve of flowing liquid. Jack rocks, CC water, vodka martini, 5 Ritas, 1 grande, 1 strawberry, and a draft. That martini takes a twist. It has entered our solar system. It's becoming our solar system. If that kid doesn't make contact... What's that? His teddy bear is missing? Priscilla closed her eyes and slipped into a crack between the bar noise and the movie noise, where under her coffee-scented breath she prayed, asking God, in whom she only marginally believed, what to do about the formula, what to do about Ricky's lust and love. She closed out of habit with an amen, not knowing for sure what amen really meant, but suspecting that when God finally ended the world, his big boom voice would not bellow amen, but that's all, folks, a la Porky Pig. Into the dining room she went, virtually limping with fatigue, screwing up her face with distaste at the diners being shown to their tables. What kind of gourmet would trust a Mexican restaurant where the entrees smelled like ketchup and the waitresses wore sailor dresses? It was a long way from the perfect taco. 5 minutes later, she was back in the bar, placing her first drink order. 2 slow gin fizzes, 2 fast gin fizzes, 3 martinis, dry, no starch, 28 shots of tequila, 3 buds, a bud, a tree frog, and a Coors Light, 7 rum separators, 5 coffee nudges, 2 scotch and waters, 5 vodka and buttermilks, a zombie, a zombie, 4 tequila mockingbirds, 13 glasses of cheap white wine, a mug of mulled burgundy, 9 shots of wild turkey, hold the stuffing on 3, 1 Manhattan with 8 cherries, 2 yellow jackets, 15 straight jackets, 37 flying dragons, 9 brides of Frankenstein, and a green beret made with 7-Up instead of sweet vermouth, and in place of grenadine, banana liqueur. Amen. The fraud backfired. Before Priscilla had reached the end, Ricky was in full panic. And even after Pris said, "Make that 2 margaritas grande and a carta blanca," Ricky just stood there, up to her elbows in glassware, looking as if she'd had the brain electricity sucked out of her by the black hole, which on the TV had stopped eating Grand Coulee Dam and was sharing a granola bar with Jeffrey Joshua. There was at least 1 tear in her eye. "That was a rotten thing to do to you on your first shift alone," Priscilla apologized. Then she whispered, "Take your break at 9:30 if you can. I've got a special treat for us." But of course, Ricky wanted something more than the pinch of cocaine, and Priscilla found herself during break in the ladies' stall with her pantyhose down around her knees. "I'm sorry. I guess I'm pretty dry." "That's okay," said Ricky. "I'm like a cactus. I can make maximum use of minimum amounts of moisture." A loud rap on the restroom door caused them both to jump. Pris, are you in there?" Priscilla pushed Ricky away and hurried to pull up her danskins. "Pris, there's a delivery for you from Federal Express." It was with mixed emotions that Priscilla headed for the reservations desk. On the one hand, she was relieved to get out of Ricky's grasp. On the other, she was afraid of what that delivery might be. She had received mysteriously almost a dozen beats at her apartment. What if they started to show up at work? The Federal Express envelope contained no raw vegetables, however, but a fancy engraved invitation requesting her presence at a dinner party honoring Wolfgang Morgenstern, the Nobel Prize-winning chemist. The dinner was to be held at the Last Laugh Foundation. This was even more puzzling than the beats. Priscilla, who had completed but 1 year of her chemistry major, knew Dr. Morgenstern by reputation only, while aside from the war room at Boeing Aircraft, the Last Laugh Foundation was the most exclusive turf, the most inaccessible sanctum in Seattle. "Why me?" she asked. "The Last Laugh Foundation," mused Ricky. "That's that immortality place." "I know. Ricky, do you believe in immortality?" "I'll try anything once." The cocaine was leaning on the doorbell in Pris's tummy. She was buzzing at the same frequency as the orange auras that had begun to pulsate from the pseudo-Guadalajara wrought iron light fixtures. Physically, at least, she was primed to return to the dinner trays, freighting what she'd sworn to one diner was the most authentic Mexican cuisine north of Knott's Berry Farm. "You aren't upset with me, are you?" Ricky looked her over. "No," she said. "I realize that you're just jealous that I got the barkeep job. They couldn't have put you in there, Pris. You're too scatterbrained and too clumsy." She turned on her flat heel and walked away. Priscilla made it through the shift without crying or praying, although befuddled by the invitation and bruised by Ricky's remark, she concentrated on her duties with difficulty. So badly did she mix up orders that 2 tables didn't tip her. That was no way to earn 3 ounces of jasmine oil, let alone to earn 3 years of omphaloclepsis, which was what the doctor ordered. Or did the doctor order the smothered burrito? Bicycling home at midnight, she pedaled 5 blocks out of her way to pass the Capitol Hill townhouse in which the Last Laugh Foundation was headquartered. It was a stately old mansion, charming of cupola, angular of gable, a university's worth of ivy clawing the ivory paint from its boards, a high stucco wall topped with broken glass protecting its grounds. As usual, there were people at its gate, trying in one manner or another to get past the security guards. However, whereas a month before there might have been 10 people at the gate, now in the middle of a damp November night, they were lined up to the end of the block. Curious, thought Priscilla, promptly pedaling over a steep curb, spilling her bike, ripping her pantyhose, and scraping her leg. By the time she reached home, attended to her wound, shampooed, and donned her dirty lab coat, she had put both the invitation and Ricky's insult pretty much out of mind. From the bathroom cabinet, she removed a Kotex box and checked under the pads to ascertain that the bottle was still hidden there. She did not remove the bottle, however. What was the use? She needed help, but God was in a meeting whenever she rang, and the daughters of the Daily Special had postponed her grant almost as often as she had postponed going to bed with Ricky. With Ricky, her sponsor, turning hostile, Priscilla had to assume that the grant might never come through. Well, shit, she said. Shit. I've got no choice but to make that call. She shoved the Kotex box back in the cabinet, pulled on some stiff jeans, dipped a fistful of coins from the fishbowl, and ran down the hall, not even looking to see if she might have run over a beat. It was late, but she knew that her party had a habit of working into the night. Her finger was trembling, but she managed to dial. The wall phone swallowed the quarters. Priscilla swallowed her pride. "Hello, stepmother," she said. There was a pause, then, "Where are you?" Madame Lily Devalier always asked, "Where are you?" in a way that insinuated that there were only two places on earth one could be, New Orleans and somewhere ridiculous. New Orleans. When we accept small wonders, we qualify ourselves to imagine great wonders. Thus, if we admit that an oyster, radiant, limp, succulent, and serene, can egress from a shell, we are ready to imagine Aphrodite exiting from a similar address. We might, moreover, should we have that turn of mind, imagine Aphrodite exuding her shell, constructing her studio apartment, its valves, hinges, and whorls of her own secretions, the way an oyster does, although the average imagination, it must be said, probably would stop somewhere short of that. "Oh no, Miss Lily, I not be putting no raw oyster in my mouth. I eats cold soup with you. I eats liver spread with you, made from goose livers, but I not be eating no slime." "Really, child, how inelegant." Madame Devalier replaced upon its bed of rock salt and cracked ice the half shell whose contents she had been about to slurp, and while waiting for the word slime to cease its vile reverberations in her mind's ear, she poured herself another glass of champagne. "To Papa's fat," she said. "We done drink to fat 3 times," said Valou, raising her own glass of knee-high orange soda, to which Madame Devalier had added under protest, even though it was a celebration, a squirt of hurricane drops. "Very well, then, to Bingo Pajama." "To Bingo Pajama," Valou said wistfully, "wherever him po soul be. Now, cher, you mustn't worry your pretty head about that crazy Jamaican. I am confident he can take care of himself." She sipped. She studied the circle of shellfish, each ritzy blob glistening upon the lustrous floor or ceiling of its own intimate architecture, the solidified geometry of its desire. The oyster was an animal worthy of New Orleans, as mysterious and private and beautiful as the city itself. If one could accept that oysters built their houses out of their lives, one could imagine the same of New Orleans, whose houses were similarly and resolutely shuttered against an outside world that could never be trusted to show proper sensitivity toward the oozing delicacies within. She sipped again. If one could accept the exaggerated fact of the oyster, one could imagine the exaggerated fact of Bingo Pajama, who had disappeared after the policeman who attempted to arrest him for selling flowers without a permit had been stung to death by bees. One could imagine that Bingo Pajama would keep his promise to bring them still more jasmine, the laborious but successful extraction of whose essence had occasioned this little celebration on Royal Street. The telephone rang. "I'll get it," said Madame, somewhat surprised that the dusty phone remembered how to ring. There was an odd look on her face as she pried her bulk from the depression in the love seat, much as the counterman at Acme's had pried open the oysters a half hour before. When she returned to the rear of the shop 5, maybe 10 minutes later, her expression was even more odd. She looked to be sad, but gay about it, or gay, but sad about it. Sad, gay, it was all the same to Baloo, whose immense brown eyes were becoming somnambulant, if not squamulous, a sure sign that the hurricane drops were beginning to take effect. "Priscilla was a Mardi Gras baby," Lily said, out of the blue. "Have I mentioned that?" "Yes, ma'am. Yo sure enough have mentioned that." A Mardi Gras baby. She drained her glass, regarding the oysters now with no appreciable indication of appetite. "Conceived one Mardi Gras, abandoned the next." "Who's she mama?" "Pardon?" "Oh, wallet lifter she daddy. Who's she mama?" "Her mother." Madame sighed into her empty glass. "You know, Valou, I no longer remember her mother's real name. She was from a good Irish Catholic family, lived in a fine house in the Garden District." "I know that. But the devil will bite a young girl if she gives him a spot, and he sure took a nibble of this one. She could have watched the parade from her veranda. They lived right on St. Charles. But no, she had to come down to the quarter, mix with the so-called artists. She loved those artists. And that is where Wally spotted her. He seduced her on the street, under the crepe paper skirts of a float that had stalled. Reverend Wallet Lifter. That's what the cynics called him, yes. The Reverend Wally Lester was what he called himself. From the Irish Channel, poor white trash, more than likely, but he wasn't dumb. I never actually heard him preach, but he must have been fairly good. He had the looks and he had the tongue. Traveled throughout Texas, Oklahoma too, conducting revival meetings in a circus tent, over-dramatizing the Word of God, turning the scriptures into a cross between German opera and a hockey game, as only a Protestant can do. Then every year, about a week before Mardi Gras, never fail, he'd suddenly show up in the quarter. Oh, nobody enjoyed Mardi Gras more than Wally. He'd go on a rip that lasted well into Lent. After everybody else had wound down, he'd still be bouncing off barroom walls. Next thing you knew, though, he'd be gone. He'd go down into Mexico. Some said after women, some said after gold. He obviously had more luck with the women. In any case, by Easter Sunday, he would be back to preaching, setting up his plastic pulpit on top of half the prairie dog holes in Texas. Until Mardi Gras, when he would return to the quarter and start the whole thing all over again. Sacre bleu. "Yo, oysters be gettin' warm, ma'am," Valou announced dreamily. Ignoring her, Madame Duvalier went on telling her things about the Reverend Wally Lester that she'd told a dozen times before. "Warm slime don't taste nowhere near as nice as cold slime," said Valou. She smiled, revealing a mouthful of small iridescent teeth. If oysters drove cars, their hood ornaments would look like Valou's smile. The girl traveled with him for a season. She gave birth in his air-conditioned trailer, parked in one of those awful towns where jackrabbits hop down Main Street. Lily made a face. "I've always maintained that Priscilla got off to a bad start by not being born in New Orleans." She refilled her glass. "More champagne? Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. I s'pose that be Miss Priscilla on de phone?" I'll never forget the day they came back. The minute they hit town, she gathered up her things and jumped on the first streetcar to the Garden District. Although they managed to have le combat before she got away, Wally brought the baby by the shop so that I could see her, and there were claw marks on his cheek. The blood was barely dry. He rubbed the baby's bare bottom over the scratches as if that would heal them. A few days later, he brought her by a second time and asked if I would watch her while he administered to those sinners who mock the true Christian meaning of Mardi Gras, as he put it. It was a year before I saw him again. His face had healed without scarring. "Why you? Why me? Why did Wally leave her with me? Well, I suppose he trusted me. You see, he used to hang out at the shop. He like you?" A blush stained Madame Duvalier in the way that debits color the ledgers of a failing business. No, he wasn't interested in me personally. Even then, I was too old and stout. I was born old and stout. He was interested in the work. He wanted to learn the work, although what an evangelist would do with it, I never understood. I sold him some items. He was the only white man I ever sold to. An oyster Cadillac rolled into view, Valou, Jackson, and Sizers sparkling, leading the way. "Hee, old wallet lifter be jazzing up Jesus with some drops." Romance powders and money mojo were more in his line, but that's neither here nor there. I agreed to rear his child because, well, I was convinced that I would never marry, and because I thought I could use a girl in the shop, someone to help, you see, someone to teach perfumery to. That didn't work, of course. Priscilla always loathed the shop, and I never had the assistant I needed until you. It might have been Valou's turn to blush. Whether she did or not, we'll never know. She did manage a proud pursing of the lips, however, and then she asked, "Dat Miss Pris on de line?" She was not a brat, you understand. In fact, she would make a sincere effort every now and again to follow in my footsteps, as it were. She was careless and messy, broke a lot of things, but she'd work hard. Then Mardi Gras would come around, and sure enough, here's Wally. He'd bring her armloads of presents, lollipops and pralines, all sorts of sweets, and dollies and stuffed animals and tricycles, and later bikes and the cutest clothes, little dotted Swiss dresses with ruffles and sashes. She thought her papa was rich. She believed that with all her heart, and Wally encouraged it, the swine. When he left, she'd beg him to take her with him, but he'd tell her that he had to go south of the border to attend to his gold mines, and that Mexico was no place for rich little American girls. Mon Dieu, how it killed me to watch her fight back the tears. For months afterward, she'd be moody and morose, claimed that the smell of perfume made her ill. Lily poured the last of the champagne. Briefly, she regarded the uneaten oysters, which, although beginning to look increasingly flabby, lay in perfect repose upon the remaining hemispheres of the dream houses in which they'd once enjoyed such exquisite solitude. 2 strong hands and a steel blade were required to storm the privacy of the oyster's dark entrance hall. It takes a team of 4 horses to force the giant clam of the South Seas to yawn against its will. Every passive mollusk demonstrates the hidden vigor of introversion, the power that is contained in peace. About that time, the shop started to lose money. I went to Paris with my formulas and was brutally rejected. Lefebvre showed interest, but eventually it too turned me down. At the mention of Lefebvre, a blush actually did seep through Velou's protective pigmentation, spreading upon her Carib complexion like an oil slick on the muddy Mississippi. And even though her nervous system was, by hurricane drops, entertained, she flinched. After stringing me along, and with not so much as a franc for my time and trouble, I should never have left New Orleans. I was depressed after that, I admit, but Priscilla was worse. At least I kept a roof over our heads, dealing in items I had rather not discuss. Priscilla wouldn't turn a hand, just talked about her papa all the time, how he was going to come and give her this and that, buy her a sports car, pay for ballet lessons, move her into a big house with a yard. Until finally I had to tell her the truth about the Reverend Wallet Lifter and his Mexican fortune. I had no choice, Velou. Velou was still recovering from the dent that the reference to the French fragrance house of Lefebvre had kicked in the fuselage of her midnight airship. She perceived that her mistress needed comforting, but "She believe you?" was the extent to which she could respond. No, she didn't believe me, but she never forgave me either. Oh, I suppose deep down she may have believed me. In any case, Wally's next visit was a stormy one and did little to improve our financial situations. 6 months later, she ran off and married that accordion player. How old her be den? 16, Madame shook her head and clucked. 16. He had plenty money. He had some money. Priscilla imagined that it was plenty, and money was what she wanted. I mean, he was pushing 40, not exactly your dashing Latin lover, and she was such a pretty little thing, and so smart in school. His band, it was one of those South American tango fandango bands, was fairly popular for a while. They traveled all over, from Puerto Rico to the New York State mountains, playing in resort hotels. He claimed he was going to train her to dance with his troupe. I can't fathom how either one of them could have believed that for an instant. Mon Dieu, the girl has 2 left feet. Him go he home, though, overseas. Yes, his band eventually folded, and he returned to Argentina alone. But I believe she had already left him by then. She left him right after Wally passed away. Her come watch, she daddy die? Velou knew perfectly well that Priscilla had been at her father's deathbed. She'd heard that story more times than there were beets rotting under her cot, but she was disposed to hear it again. Pris was there at the end. Wally took sick in Mexico, and he had the decency to come back to New Orleans to expire. He was rather far gone when Pris and I got to Charity. Madame crossed herself, ringed fingers flashing like UFOs over the summits of her mountainous breasts. The second we walked into the ward, though, he opened his eyes. His eyes were heavy and feverish, rather like yours are right now. He stared at Priscilla for quite a while before he spoke. What'd he say? He said, "You're starting to turn out like your old daddy, darling. A novelty act. That hit her like a brick. Then he recognized me and winked. He was only 50, but he looked 65. "Stay in touch," he said to me. "Have you ever—" He closed his eyes and folded his arms on his chest. You could almost see the life ticking out of him. He sighed, kind of sweetly, and a contented smile softened his face. He muttered something, then he was gone. "What'd he mutter?" He said, "The perfect taco." That's it. Those were his last words. He sighed, "Ah," and said, "The perfect taco." The two women were silent for some time, maybe meditating upon the mystery of it all, the life, the death, the goofiness, maybe in Valu's case in communion with a private totem. The oysters, those tender masters of sequestrable engineering, apparently had given up the ghost, perhaps to be reborn in distant times, in distant foams, as Aphrodites. When finally Valu spoke, the abruptness caused Lily to accidentally jettison the last remaining bubbles of champagne. "What Miss Priscilla call about?" "Pardon? Oh, well, Miss Priscilla is seeking help, monetary or otherwise, in obtaining some— are you prepared for this? Some premium jasmine oil." "Jamais!" snapped Valu. She caught herself. "Never," she repeated in English, catching herself once more and amending her response to never. "Chérie, I am surprised at you. Don't look so upset." With a yellowed linen napkin, Madame dabbed at the champagne spots on the love seat velvet. "The Parfumerie de Valier has extracted 8 ounces of the most magnificent jasmine essence the world has ever known. When we establish the proper base note, we will own a bouffe that will have Paris crawling here to me on its knees. It could ruin us if our extract fell into the wrong hands, but still, Pris has some rights. It took a lot of heart for her to turn to me after I rejected her 3 years ago, pushed her away in favor of you when she asked to come back into the shop. But I am aware of what you are going to say. She refused to help me when I really needed her. Well, I refused to help her when she needed it too. You help her she whole life. I could have helped more. How? I could have told her the truth about Wally years before I did. I could have squelched her silly fantasies." Madame paused. "But then, perfume business is fantasy business, is it not?" She draped her napkin over the shellfish platter like a shroud. "Don't fret, chère. I didn't even mention our jasmine to Priscilla. And since we have no assurance that the Jamaican will supply any more, we may not be able to afford to share with her. Yet, what harm if we did? I can't imagine how she might use it. To be frank, it would please me if her recent interest in perfumes proved sincere. But she is far from expert in the field." Valu sat upright, her countenance uncharacteristically grim. "Her hab de bottle," she said firmly. "Her hab dat dad blasted bottle." The older woman seemed about to protest, but changed her mind. The two of them just sat there as if they were mourners sitting the night with the shrouded oysters. It was early in the week, so no bellows of alcoholic gaiety drifted in from Bourbon Street, nor any screech from a tourist having her purse snatched over on St. Anne. They might as well have been on the plantation. Indeed, they could make out crickets rubbing their patent leather hooves together in some nearby courtyard. A tomcat wailed. A foghorn Mark Twained on the river. Then directly above their heads, there was a single soft thud or plop, followed by the softer sound of something rolling across the floor. Said Madame D. Maybe our bingo pajama has returned. Yes, ma'am, or else it be somebody else all the time be throwing dem beats. That, at any rate, was what Baloo had intended to say. At precisely that moment, however, the hurricane drops hit her with full force, and instead she exclaimed, "Oize! Chut, 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 chut!"